You have a recent piece about Eliot Engel that I would love for you to talk about, fresh off the press, hot off the presses. And then a piece before that on Antifa, which is very exciting. So let's start with the bigger threat of those, which is, of course, Eliot Engel. I do want to announce, guys, that I tweeted a couple days ago that people really needed to vote for Bowman for many reasons, including the fact that if and when he won, I would be able to write a headline called White Hawk Down. And you all helped make that happen. So without any further ado, and I'm going to open up your article, please tell us about this great piece that you wrote about Engel.
You captured pretty well, White Hawk Down. He had tried to sort of rebrand in the last couple of years. It would be misleading to call him a sort of right-wing Democrat with respect to domestic policy, at least. So, for example, he embraced Medicare for All, which I think is a testament to how effectively that has been advanced within the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But when you look at his foreign policy, it's quite a different story. He's pretty well known for being a major recipient, perhaps the top recipient within the House of pro-Israel PAC funds. As a matter of fact, during this primary, the Republican group actually funneled money through a Democratic pro-Israel group to Engel, and that was first reported by The Intercept. I thought that was pretty illustrative of his time in Congress, because I started looking through, just his record, and I was astonished by, the number of times he found common cause with not just Republican figures, but even Trump administration folks. So, for example, during the Obama administration, he was pretty widely criticized for opposing the Iran deal until, of course, it passed, at which point when Trump won, then he rebranded and said, well, actually, maybe we want the Iran deal after all, now that a Republican is advancing it. But right. when it was Obama in the White House, he actually gave a joint press conference with Mike Pence, who, of course, at the time was a congressperson, and he joined him to condemn and oppose any UN investigation into the Israeli commando raid of the Gaza flotilla that came to Gaza to try to provide them with humanitarian aid. Ended up killing something like 8 or 9 activists. And not only did he oppose, it's not like there was an investigation and he disagreed with the results. He didn't want there to be a UN investigation. And his statement for why was pretty much identical to Pence's and the Republicans generally, which is that looking into Israel is of its nature illegitimate. Because we have to be there. They have this term, strategic partnership. Right. You are talking about a country that, has an ugly human rights record. Right. We call it a strategic partnership, as if there's some kind of realpolitik reason that we have to be adults here and think about think strategically about why we need to condone some of this stuff that a lot of people would think is bad.
With Israel, though, is it framed as a strategic partnership? Isn't Israel kind of like the bestie of the United States? Like, politicians are always calling Israel special friend, special relationship. Do they actually use the term strategic partnership for Israel, or is that reserved for people we're not quite as openly amorous with?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's changing, and I think this election shows exactly how it's changing. When you look at the demographic characteristics of the Democratic Party, younger folks of all ethnic backgrounds are a lot more skeptical of what we do in terms of military aid for Israel than Democratic voters in the past have been. So I think you are going to see a shift away from and towards the rhetoric that we used to describe, our say arms exports and coordination with Saudi Arabia, for instance, which itself has become increasingly entwined and working with, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, so on and so forth, working with Israel now, increasingly becoming less and less distinct with respect to their foreign policy. So I think we're going to see a lot of the same language we used to describe, these theocratic, frankly, dictatorships. Right. I think the language is going to start to reflect that a lot more.
Mike Pence's suit is incredible in that picture.
Let me see.
That's the Obama suit.
It's
That's
like,
the Obama suit.
But Obama, at least it fit better. Like, Mike, look at those sleeves. Like, is that his older brother's? That's like his older brother's suit. A hand-me-down. It looks terrible.
That's the 3 7-year-olds in the trench coat suit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
His head is kind of behind. It's like those old dog pictures where they would put the dog's head and try to make it look like he's like playing tennis or something.
Yeah.
Totally. Awful. Dog shit.
That out for him?
Yeah, it looks terrible.
Well, it's something about being a Republican. You can't have anything that fits, which is why Eliot Engel's suit doesn't fit either, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it gets away. Peter King looks just so Peter Kingian. I mean, God bless him.
He kind of looks like Leland Palmer for any Twin Peaks fans out there.
Yeah,
yeah, he does.
He kind of looks like a Yenta, like a 60-something-year-old Jewish woman.
Yeah, that too.
You know what I mean? Like,
Shout out to Chris Shea of The Nation for picking that photo, by the way.
oh yeah, thank you for that. Yeah,
it illustrates
so great.
exactly what. Yeah, that's Engel is just voting. Not just so a lot of people know him for his positions in the Middle East and Israel, but in Latin America it's bad as well.
Yeah. And the coup in Bolivia.
He was quick to move on to the next government. They love to frame it as, oh, we need to embrace democracy and have a new election. And it's like, well, but we just had an election. Like, it's not really a legitimate one if you just decide to ignore the previous one and hold a new one, And so that was sort of his strategy with that. But it's very interesting to see people like AOC come in and condemn these things. And, I've seen people be critical of AOC's foreign policy, and she's certainly more staid than she could be. But she is saying things to the frustration of a lot of the party in the center that causes a lot of headaches for them to have to explain why they're not also condemning these coups. Right. So it is creating an interesting contrast, I think.
And you mentioned in your piece that he wanted to strip Ilhan Omar, right, of her position.
So she had a committee assignment, and this is really why I think this election was so important, and why you saw Democratic leadership throwing a lot of what they had at Bowman to try to stop them, because this wasn't just an ordinary congressional race. There were other primaries taking place that people like Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer and all of these top Democrats coming behind Engel in an almost like comical overkill sort of way to try to thumb the scales. They're not just doing that because it's any race. They're doing it because he's chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I cover a lot of sort of foreign policy, national security type stuff. And something that folks might not know is that Foreign Affairs Committee, they get read into and are given classified briefings all the time that the rest of the public does not get, and that's a huge mechanism of oversight that we have for a lot of this classified information. If you look at the way the laws in our system is constructed, it's really one of the only ways we have for the public to learn about what sorts of classified things are going on. So if they lose a chairmanship like this from someone who's very, gets a lot of money from military contractors and the like, no matter who they replace him with, and they're going to try to replace him with a really bad centrist, I don't dispute that. It's going to be hard to find one who has the exact same type of politics, quite as reactionary as him. And so when Congress gets these briefings, they can come to a reporter like me, they can leak these classified things to us, and it's actually illegal. It's sort of in debate, but it's basically illegal for them to do so. That's really important when you have, to give you an example, we have you mentioned Ilhan Omar. So if you get the right people on these committees, you end up getting people that, were involved in war crimes grilled, as you saw her do with Eliot Engel.
In 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That
was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation.
It's really a historic moment. I can't think of a time when someone that powerful had to face not just questions about were you competent in how you carried out X horrible military policy, but it was fundamentally wrong and immoral.
On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by US-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. You later said that the US policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I will
Yes
not
or no?
No.
I will
Sorry,
take-
Mr.
I will
Chairman,
take
but
that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving US interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether you, under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question.
I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that before. That was really startling. So they try really hard to lock down these committee assignments because they don't want it to go, because you see what happens when you've got people with relatively, progressive politics that have these seats.